Good evening. We'll call to order the Sparks Planning Commission meeting for Thursday, June 18th, 2015. We'll start with a roll call.
Commissioner Field?
Here.
Commissioner Camerota?
Here.
Commissioner Lee?
Here.
Commissioner Nowicki?
Here.
Commissioner Sanders?
Here.
Commissioner Bowles? Absent. Commissioner Sperber? Absent. Assistant City Attorney Doug Fernley?
Here.
City Attorney Armando Arnaz?
City Clerk.
Long pick.
Present.
All right, now we'll move to public comment. This item is for either public comment on any action item or for any general public comment. It is limited to no more than 3 minutes. So is there anybody that would like to talk on for any items? Yeah, come on up. Just state your name and have a seat.
I'm not fooling anybody. For the record, I'm Gina Perry, City Sparks, and darn grateful to live here. I have trouble speaking loud, so if you will be kind enough to pass these out, you can read what I'm saying if you can't hear me. Okay? The flowers are free. Somewhere in Lady Pleasant. If it's the pleasure of the commission, I'm not sure what to do. My spiel that I read is 1 minute and 40 seconds. And what I have is a short snippet of video from a newscast that runs 2 minutes with the commission's indulgence.
Ardina, real quick, could you sit down and speak into the mic so it's recorded?
That's why I gave you that to read. Oh, okay. This thing won't go back is why I'm standing. Am I missing something? See that
You can just swap your chairs out. Yeah, just swap.
I know George did this. George is the one that gave me that chair. And here's the flash drive, dear. And you'll just take care of that for me. Okay. For the record, Ardina Perry, City of Sparks, proud City of Sparks. I have a short spiel, 1.5 minutes. I can read it or you can read it. And this video is, I think, 1 minute and 95 seconds. Good evening. I have been working diligently to inform the City of Sparks of the tremendous fiscal, health, and welfare impact of Washoe County's adoption of an ordinance currently under review by the Attorney General's office. Our group has appeared before the Board of County Commissioners and Sparks City Council on several occasions. I am most grateful for the Sparks City Council's interest in this matter and the direction they have given to staff. I am here to ask for your cooperation on this matter as well. I have spoken with Paul Leporelli of the Washoe County District Attorney's Civil Division, and he has said to me, if Sparks does not want trap, neuter, and dump, we could opt out by using our zoning ordinances. That's why I'm here for Title 20. I asked him if that would cause repercussions from the county, and he said absolutely not. Our zoning was our business, and if we do not want feral cat colonies in our city, we don't have to have them. We do have to protect our businesses and private citizens from this nuisance. I have a close friend who owns a major portion of our industrial area. The cats being dumped as part of the trap, neuter, re-abandoned program and fed along the river are so bad that her swampers have to clear the docks. They can't even leave the load sitting out there on the docks, okay? Our parks have become litter boxes. The Nevada Department of Wildlife is considering declaring the entire Truckee River corridor a preserve. That could have an impact on Sparks if we have to go that far, okay? This was not a benign decision by the county. The City of Sparks was given no input in before this decision was made. We were told the day before the second reading. There was an online poll, and less than 3% of the people from Sparks voted in that, and we voted against it. So that's it. So I would ask you if you would consider protecting our property rights and our health and public safety. And does somebody want to plug that in? I can't touch anything. What do you want me to do, huh?
Yeah, it is a public hearing item also on our agenda.
Correct.
Then, so if you would like to save it and come back up for that.
Well, I just thought if you saw this, we could put it up, and then I'd have to worry about dropping it. But did I blow it?
Why don't we wait for the next, for when
Okay,
it comes
don't
up
let
in the
me forget
agenda?
my little flash drive.
I will not.
We promise we won't.
Okay, and don't take forever, and 10 feet's not enough on mobile.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Oh, you want to sign a card, didn't you? This person didn't sign a card.
Well, it's on the agenda, so there'll be an opportunity later on in the meeting to talk about this. Okay. Well, if you can just come up, yep, if you'd like to come up, speak your name, and then after you're done, you can fill out a
That's
card.
fine.
It'd be
Thank
great.
you. Good evening. My name is Janet DeRobio. I've been a resident of Sparks since 1978. I just became aware of the question over the spay-neuter return issues going on. I have to say that I've been, like I said, a homeowner and an apartment dweller. I currently live in an apartment complex that has a stray feral cat problem. We have 2 or 3 people in the complex that have taken on the trapping, the feeding, the neutering, and the releasing of the cats. The colony is getting bigger and bigger and bigger because there's never an end to the number of cats. The problem that we're having in the complex is that everything smells. The playgrounds, there's little mounds for the cats have used it as a litter box. The flower beds, the cats spray. They've even sprayed my front door, and it's just a real problem with the number of cats. My neighbor next door has got at least 8 cats that I know of that are hanging around that she's taking care of. The complex there have a lot of children, and on one particular occasion, I caught a group of about 5 or 6 little kids, ranging probably in age from about 6 to maybe 12, chasing a cat around the complex with sticks with the intent of trying to beat the cat to death. And this was one of the stray feral cats that was being taken care of in the colony. It was a sad situation. I stopped it. The cat got away. Everything was fine. But it goes to show what a hardship that these cats have and what a harsh life that they can live. You know, you hear about cats getting in car engines and that sort of thing, and where they're just seeking heat and warmth in the wintertime. But this is a real problem. I'm not against trapping and neutering the cats, but what I am in favor of is, on top of that, is trapping, neutering, and rehabilitating these cats so that they can go into a home where they can be cared for and loved and taken care of, rather than living this harsh life on the street. We have a major problem in Sparks. I've known for years about the cats being dumped over on Spice Island area. I've seen it happen. I've seen people drive up, open the trunk of their car, let cats out of carriers, and they scatter and run because, of course, they're terrified. They don't know where they are and what's going on. I also was a humane officer with the Nevada Humane Society for 17 years, and I dealt with this trap-neuter release problem in the community. The organization at that point in time did not support it. But as an officer, we were called out many times to mitigate problems between property owners and the cat colony keepers or the homeowners or whatever, wanting us to remedy the situation. And it almost always came back to the smell or the destruction of property from them digging up flowers, being in the flower beds and that sort of thing. We did what we could to try to ease the problem, either through the use of animal control or with their permission trapping the cats and taking them in and finding other places they could go for rehabilitation in the community where they could be adopted out. Some cases the cats were so fractious or so ill or so injured that they couldn't be, and so obviously those cats were put out of their misery. The stories I could tell would go on, but I won't take your time right now other than to say that I'm against trap, neuter, return, and in favor of trap, neuter, and rehabilitate in Sparks. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. All right, anybody else from the public that would like to speak on an item that's either on the agenda or not? Okay. Seeing none, we'll close the public comment in this area, and we'll move to the approval of the agenda.
Move to approve as submitted.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to approve the agenda. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? All right, motion passes. Now we'll move to the approval of the minutes.
Move to approve as submitted.
Second. Okay, we have a first and a second on the approval of the minutes. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? All right. Minutes are approved. Now we'll move to announcements and committee reports.
On the announcements front, there will be no planning commission meeting on Thursday before 4th of July. And that would be on the 2nd of July, so no planning commission meeting that day.
All right, any informational items?
On the informational item side, the mayor's recommendation on an appointment to fill out Commissioner Sanders' term will be on the agenda on Monday, and the recommendation there is Frank Peterson. So we will find out on Monday whether that's in fact the person who will fill out Ms. Sanders' term.
Thank you. All right, so now we'll move to the public hearing items. First on the agenda is PCN 15022, consideration and possible action major deviation. Karen Melby presenting.
Good evening, Planning Commissioners. Karen Melby, Senior Planner. Before you tonight is a request for a major deviation, and what they're requesting is to reduce the rear setback from 40 feet to 20 feet, which represents a 50% reduction. I have put on the DocuCam a vicinity map. Let me move this up. This street right here is Shadow Lane. This is the property. This is Country Circle coming up here. I've put the city boundary on here. The word city is on the side of the city boundary. So you can see this is a pocket in the Washoe County, but it's in our sphere. So we've taken planning jurisdiction based on the, what do you call it? The extraterritorial agreement. Sorry. The lot is an acre in size, located at 2001 Country Circle. The proposed location of the detached garage allows the property owner to use the existing driveway on their property and doesn't necessitate that they drive over the leach field. Here is a site plan showing this would be their access coming in and their driveway. Here's the house, and this is the proposed garage. There. The new garage will replace several of the existing storage sheds that they have on the property. The Sparks Design Standard Manual requires that any new structure be architecturally compatible to the to the other buildings on the property, including building materials and colors. Therefore, this structure will have to match the main structure. The staff finds that the requested is consistent with the 5 findings for major deviations and is recommending approval with 4 conditions. That concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Did we have any opposition?
I did receive 2 phone calls, but once I explained what the applicant was requesting, they said, "Oh, I have no issue."
Sounds like you're tearing some stuff down and replacing it with a garage.
Correct, yeah.
Karen, I went to look at this property, and I couldn't find it. I couldn't even find Romandale Drive.
You mean Country Circle Drive? Country Circle?
Well, it says Country Circle's off Romandale Drive.
It's off of Shadow
All the way
Lane.
down Shadow Lane and back, and I couldn't find it.
It's a little
He's got to be a
lane.
road.
It's not much of a... And it's a private road. It's a private road, so it's not...
No guards or nothing.
Mm-mm.
Okay.
Over there by the ballpark, I guess.
All right, any more questions for Karen? Is the applicant here? Would like to speak? And state your name, sir.
Good evening. My name is Mike Vicks. I'm with Monte Vista Consulting. I'm the applicant's representative, and Rich Rowe, the property owner, is here as well. We're here and happy to answer any questions you may have for us, and thank you for your time.
How tall is the structure? I was sitting here, maybe my eyesight just isn't good. How tall is it going to be? And would it obstruct any
24
views?
feet, right?
or anything?
It shouldn't impact any views. The top of the the top of the ridge is 24 foot 9 inches, so it's relatively low, single story, and pretty standard roof pitch, I believe. Yeah, 5 and 12 roof pitch, which is.
All right, any questions for the applicant? All right, this is a public hearing item. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
So if anybody from the public that would like to discuss this item, please, now's your chance. All right, seeing none, we will close the public hearing item and bring it back to the council for any discussion.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion. I move to approve the major deviation associated with PCN 15022, adopting findings MD1 through MD5, and the facts supporting these findings as set forth in the staff report, subject to the conditions of approval 1 through 4 as listed in the staff report.
Second.
Oh, I have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? All right. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? All right. Good luck, guys.
Thank you for that.
Have fun. Okay, we'll now move to the second item on the agenda, which is PCN 14039. Karen Melby presenting.
Good evening, Planning Commissioners. Karen Melby, Senior Planner. One second. The area outlined in black on this exhibit is the area for the Plan Development Handbook, which is the Kylie Northeast Golf Community Plan Development. This would be Vista Boulevard, right here, for orientation. The Kylie Northeast Golf Community Plan Development Handbook was approved by City Council on October 13, 2003. The intent of the handbook was to develop the approximately 279 acres of land into 338 residential units, a municipal golf course, and some open space. The central feature of that plan development was to be a municipal golf course. After approval of the handbook, the City of Sparks decided not to develop the golf course. As a result, there was never any development on these properties, and they have remained vacant to this day. The open space area is owned by the Kylie Ranch Conservancy Foundation. Let me put this exhibit up. This exhibit shows you the ownership. Sorry, the text is a little small, but this is owned by Rising Tides here, these properties. These properties in here are owned by the Kylie Conservancy Foundation. And then these 3 properties here on the east side of Vista are owned by the Golden Triangle LLC. The 3 properties have agreed or applying together to abandon this handbook because they feel the property will never be developed as proposed in the Plan Development Handbook. The western properties, which is owned by Rising Tides, these pieces here, will be incorporated into this area, which is known as the Kylie Ranch North Plan Development. That's the plan intent. And then this Golden Triangle, which we reviewed a few months ago, a zone change on that to new urban district or a plan development zoning, they will be coming in with their own Plan Development Handbook once this handbook's been abandoned. The wetlands will remain as wetlands. Staff supports this abandonment and recommends that approval. That concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Kind of have one. Under the initial agreement when it was okayed by the City Council in 2003, the wetlands and all that, were they going to go away at that time for residential?
No.
They weren't.
The wetlands were never to be, the pool area for the dam in that area was never
Right.
to be developed. The golf course was going to ring around those wetlands.
Okay. Thank you, Karen.
Oh, and one other comment, I have received 3 phone calls on this property, and most of the inquiries were an explanation of what was going on with the project. Once I explained it to the people on the phone, they understood and didn't seem to have any issues or concerns.
Was the applicant here? Like to come up and talk?
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Lois Brown. I work with Rising Tides. This is basically a housekeeping measure. A lot of the approvals for Kiley Ranch were done over 10 years ago. The city had no appetite for the golf course, and we obtained those two properties to the west recently, so we're going to incorporate them into the existing Kiley Ranch North entitlements, and you'll be seeing more applications on that. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
This is a public hearing item. Thank you. If anybody would like to come up and speak?
Good evening. My name is Randy Becker. I'm wondering on the map that just went away, if it could be identified, on that particular one, what exactly is the area identified as wetlands? We've identified some areas that are in play by the developers. We use the term wetlands very broadly. Those of us that live very near this place know the entire area as wetlands. So what specifically on the map, what is wetlands and what is not?
Can we ask your staff to come in? Yeah, Karen, if you'd like to come up and...
Just to identify.
The properties that are owned by the Kiley Preservation Foundation is this parcel, this parcel, these parcel here, and this. So all of that is considered to be part of the conservation, and the majority of that is the wetlands. I know these parcels here were outside the wetlands because they were going to put, like, townhome project originally in the handbook this was going to be like townhome. So this is outside. And actually, the golf course came around like this.
I see.
So in here, I don't know if you can see the dark areas, that's the actual wetlands.
Okay, and the area on the two areas on the left, if you will, the lower portion of the green.
This one?
No, move. Yeah, that one and the one above it. Yeah, the Rising Tides portions.
Those are the two parcels that will be incorporated into the Kiley North plan development.
And is that what's represented by the green area up there?
Yes.
On this map? Okay, okay.
And part of that is actually, I think, a wetlands too. They are going to put, tentatively they're looking at putting the park down here, a community park down in this area.
And the other area will be developed in some fashion or another with housing of various
Portions of
types?
it, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Randy, there's a map.
Oh, yeah, I've got, okay, yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir, come on up.
Rich Perry, Fairway Vista runs along the very edge of that property. Again, the, Rising Tide? What's the setback from our properties, from our subdivision, which is Front Street Bungalows and Rising Tide property? Is there going to be a setback?
Karen, would you like to come back up and speak to it?
At this time, we don't know. They will have to come in with an amendment to the Kiley North Plan Development Handbook, and at that time, we will be looking at the development standards for that area, along with all the development standards for the entirely Kiley North Handbook. So at this point, we don't know what the standards, we don't even know specifically what will be developed there.
Okay. And as far as the, as far as wetlands are concerned, now from what I understand, when I bought the property about a year and a half ago, where I live, the wetlands area is a 100-year floodplain. Does anybody know anything about that? And is the Rising Tide area, now I know we haven't had a lot of rain lately, but when the rain does finally come some year, is that Rising Tide area part of that 100-year floodplain?
Yeah, would the applicant answer that? Or, excuse me,
Let's
sorry.
John.
Sorry, John. I didn't see you keyed up. Apologize.
For the record, John Martini, city engineer. As has been discussed by Karen, not everyone may realize that this structure here is actually a dam.
Right.
It was constructed after the 1986 flood events. There is a flood pool that represents the 100-year flood plain elevation. It is on the FEMA maps. We understand where it is. The term wetlands, there is a very legal term to that, is defined by the Army Corps of Engineers. This area, during the very early stages of Kiley Ranch development, there are specific areas that are jurisdictional wetlands out there. This map does not show them. We do have record of that probably going back to the early 90s. So does that answer your questions?
Somewhat. So again, having moved into the area about a year and a half ago, I was a fireman down in Florida and was part of Katrina. And just for what took place in New Orleans area, I would suggest that the city planning commission looks at the whole area, especially the is it Rising Tide? Did I say it? Rising Tide area, to make sure that there is appropriate land to handle, I say, 100-year flood. Again, I wasn't here in '86, but again, New Orleans was not, and then that whole area from Biloxi to New Orleans was not expected to have the impact that they did. In other areas, even like Texas is having problems right now. I mean, that's just a suggestion. I would suggest relooking the whole area there to make sure that there is enough land to sustain a major rain event, water event.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, John.
Thanks.
All right. Anybody else from the public who would like to talk on PCN 14039? All right. Close the public comment. We'll bring it back to the commission for any discussion.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion. I move to forward to the City Council a recommendation of approval for the abandonment of the Plan Development Handbook associated with PCN 14039 based on the facts as set forth in the staff report.
A second.
All right, motion and a second. Any more discussion? All right. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? All right. Passes. All right, moving on. We'll move on to CA 1-15. It's consideration and possible action on amending Title 20 zoning and land use controls of the Sparks Municipal Code. I think Jim Rundle presenting.
Greetings, Sparks Planning Commission. Jim Rundle, Senior Planner here. Maybe a few minutes to get some of this stuff set up. In 2011, the City of Sparks elected to conduct a comprehensive overhaul of the chapter of which its municipal code governs zoning and development, which the Planning Commission and staff always refers to as Title 20. In 2011, the city adopted a three-phased approach to doing this. Phase 1 involved some quick fixes to the code that was undertaken by city staff. One of those quick fixes was reflected tonight in the major deviation process. Phase 2 was the analysis of the zoning code, which ultimately identified some of the fixes that needed to be done in the comprehensive overhaul of the code, which is what we've called Phase 3. In Phase 2, we hired a consultant team which included Clarion and CFA of Reno. Phase 3 included the hiring of White and Smith out of Kansas City, and Commissioner Sanders participated on that RFP process as elected by the Planning Commission. At that time, again, Angela Foose, who's sitting here with me, was selected with CFA and White and Smith to participate as part of the team. When you referenced your staff report, I used the word team. I want to take a second and talk about that. This is not Jim's code. This is not Angela's code. This is not the City of Sparks' code. It was truly a community code, and we talked about some of that in the background section. We've also talked about that at some of the workshops. And so we sit up here in front of you today. Angela is, to an extent, part of the team, and we're representing here to answer questions and discussion on this code. What I'm going to try to do today is talk about things that, again, that we didn't talk about in our workshops, that we didn't talk about in the analysis that we provided you at our workshop, which I think was in March. The background section that was included in your staff report touched on the goals for the development of this new zoning code. More specifically, the City Council's direction to staff was to develop regulations which could encourage smart growth, but also have design-based zoning that allowed flexibility, but also created predictability. The creation of such a document is very challenging, so the coordination with the stakeholders was very important. One of the components they asked for was incorporation of graphics into the code, and I'm sure as you went through the code, you noticed a significant number of graphics in contrast to the former Title 20 zoning code. I have an illustration that I'd like to put up. The document can. Since our last meeting with the Planning Commission, one of the items that was requested is if you look on page 7 of your zoning code, it has the single-family residential setbacks. One of the hopes out of this zoning code is that, say in North Sparks, an applicant would no longer have the requirement to do a handbook, but the flexibility that they've always desired by doing handbooks would be incorporated into the zoning code. Again, since the workshop, we've added this component. It's under number 2 on page 7. It says lot coverage maximum. We've added a percentage that says inside the required setbacks 100%, 100%, 100% for SF9, SF7, and SF6. This illustration depicts what we're trying to talk about. One of the requests was to allow more flexibility inside those setbacks. So basically, it permits design flexibility. Our concern, the team's concern, was that occasionally code enforcement does have to go out on a site and enforce somebody trying to do too many sheds on their property, essentially covering the entire backyard with structure. So as you see in like the SF12, for example, it says 35% of the lot can be covered by structure as a maximum. So in working with the team, working with this consultant team and the stakeholders we met with, we came up with this concept that if you're on an SF9, 7, or 6 parcel, you can cover everything up inside that, the dotted line here, which essentially is talking about reflecting the setbacks that are also listed on that table. But when you want to go outside of those setbacks for, say, a shed or a patio cover or what else do you talk about? A gazebo, you'd be able to go outside that setback, but because you'd be meeting the accessory structure setbacks. But you'd only be able to cover outside of that a percentage on an SF6 parcel of 13%. Now, to an extent, it may seem like a lot of calculations and work on staff's part, but really it's not much different than the former code, which said you could only cover up to 35% of the lot. Ultimately, we think that this will, again, create flexibility in the code and some more predictability, as we talked about. Anything else you want to add on that? So this graphic that is being displayed up here staff is requesting that that the Planning Commission propose in its motion, if it chooses to accept this code, to include this graphic somewhere in proximity to page 7 as we move it forward to the City Council, because it's currently not there, but we do believe that this will help with interpretation of that standard. As we talked about in the workshops, we talked about the transit-oriented development district going to the mixed-use district. Staff is continuing to propose that to the City Council. The team is proposing that to the Planning Commission. Something that was debated and ultimately worked through was the size of sidewalks in the transit-oriented development district, which again we've proposed as the MUD, mixed-use district. The current requirement for the mixed-use district is that sidewalks along the BRT corridor, which primarily is Prater Way and Victorian, and a portion of Lincoln, should be 10 feet. 10 feet in size, and all other sidewalks in the TOD or mixed-use district, which the Planning Commission knows is quite substantial, including Audi and then pretty much everything south of Prater to the interstate, would be 6 feet in size. After a significant amount of discussion, staff is proposing to change that requirement to requiring 4-foot sidewalks in all of the TOD, with the exception of downtown, the Victorian Square area. And what we're proposing, and this is listed in your staff report, is that in downtown, we would identify what the appropriate size of that sidewalk would be at the time of entitlement, whether it's a conditional use permit or an administrative review. The thinking behind amending that standard is the Planning Commission may be familiar with, for example, the Planning Commission may be familiar with the new project being constructed on 4th Street and Lincoln. It's a new TOD type of project, higher density, senior project, and we have 4-foot wide sidewalk all the way around the property, 4-foot wide sidewalk down both the east and western sides of 4th Street, going all the way down to Victorian, which somebody might actually utilize to go to events in Victorian Square. So the concern was we're going to be requiring a 6-foot wide sidewalk here that attaches to a 4-foot wide sidewalk on both sides of the project. So as projects develop over time, you'd simply just have 4-foot to 6-foot to 4-foot to 4-foot to 4-foot to a 6-foot. So we believe the appropriate thing to do is to go back to a 4-foot wide sidewalk. You have that continuity and consistency in your TOD. And then in downtown, Victorian Square area, where we already have some wider sidewalks, we can look at it at the time of entitlement and determine the appropriate size of sidewalk at that time. So that part is listed in the draft that you have. Next item that was talked about in the staff report that was discussed post-Planning Commission workshop, post-City Council workshop, was the request from many in the development community to state that exterior color elevations for all sides with proposed materials shall be provided for review and consideration by the administrator prior to the issuance of a building permit. The inspiration for this request was developers do come through to the Planning Commission and request tentative maps prior to them actually knowing what kind of product they may want to put on that property. The Planning Commission's familiar with developers taking it one step at a time, trying to identify where they're going to create their parcels, getting that done, getting a final map done. In the past, we have had handbooks that require those elevations to come back to the Planning Commission for review and approval of the elevations that would ultimately create the homes to be constructed on those tentatively submitted parcels. What the contention was is we've spent, staff, the team has spent a lot of time in Chapter 2, in some of the other chapters, creating design standards, including landscape standards, parking standards, and architectural standards. And as I identified in the staff report, we even spent a lot of time with architects reviewing and considering components of the code. So the thought was, with all of that going into the code and with the Planning Commission having the ability to amend design standards at this point or incorporate them to an extent they've already reviewed how they'd like to see houses created, and if they're in compliance with those design standards, they should be able to just simply comply with them and not have to come back for an additional public hearing. And that, again, that standard is proposed in your current draft. A standard that staff has, or the team has proposed to amend, was talked about in the Planning Commission workshop, and I think it was also discussed at the City Council workshop, was the requirement for trees and the 25-foot on-center requirement. So one tree every 25 feet in the landscape areas. And you may have brought it up, Commissioner Lean, but it was also brought up at the council meeting that sometimes, over time, the trees begin to grow together, and what the applicants have to do, or the property owner, is take out landscaping because they begin to interrupt the visibility of the building from the street, and they also begin to create problems for the other trees on the site. And so we've proposed, and it is included in your draft, to reduce that 25 feet by 5 feet, which provides the trees that are planted an additional, 2.5 feet to grow together, and hopefully provide more visibility for signage on the site, and actually the aesthetics to be seen from the street, and reduce the amount of landscaping that ultimately has to be taken out as the landscaping begins to grow. The current municipal code, as the Planning Commission is very aware, talks about special use permits, and we're proposing changing that name to conditional use permits. As the Planning Commission is aware, number 1 or number 2 condition on every conditional use permit is an expiration date. The Planning Commission has reviewed requests to extend the expiration of conditional use permits. The current code, however, was silent on when a conditional use permit expires once a use is established. So let's use the scenario that the Planning Commission approves a conditional use permit for whatever it is, a gas station, and the gas station complies with all of the conditions of approval and operates for 10 years. There is nothing in the code that says when that conditional use permit expires if the use ceases operation. This became an issue when, say, an applicant who got a conditional use permit in 2000 decided to retire in 2015 and puts the building up for sale. Next person comes in and is ready to carry on the same use, the gas station. He has to get a new conditional use permit. Very likely the Planning Commission would put the same conditions on it that they did before. And this is in the team's opinion, a barrier to development in Sparks, or business in Sparks. So what we've proposed, and it is reflected in your draft, is that a issued conditional use permit does not expire until 1 year after the expiration of the business license. And we believe that, again, that will promote the use of buildings that were once entitled and appropriately titled and have been in compliance with their conditions of approval throughout the business operation.
Jim, if I may, why wait 1 year after?
1 year after the expiration of the business license?
Right.
The applicants talked about, the stakeholders, when we proposed it with them, their sentiment was, if I have a business license and I get it in January, it expires in January of the following year. Let's say I run the business through January and then I decide to retire. That doesn't give a broker any time to allow them to reestablish that use. And so they needed a reasonable amount of time to be able to advertise or list the gas station example that I used.
Okay.
And still have another year beyond the expiration of that business license.
Okay.
And I think, just to interject, what we are seeing and the brokers are seeing is, in the industrial area in particular, we're seeing a lot of indoor, soccer or gymnastics, things that aren't typical to an industrial area, but we're allowing them in the industrial area with a special use permit, soon to be a conditional use permit. So if that use goes away, and the brokers are then left with trying to lease that facility, and they no longer are allowed to do an indoor soccer or gymnastics or a dance studio, this gives them a little bit more flexibility in finding another user that is appropriate for that location, and it's already been deemed appropriate because you guys already approved a conditional or special use permit. So 1 year gives them a little bit more opportunity to go out and find another user that could go into that site.
And along those same lines, the team is proposing, and it is reflected in your draft, of extending nonconforming uses from 6 months to 2 years. And this was requested by the City Council. Again, it's along the same lines, is a nonconforming use ceases operation. They currently only have 6 months to reestablish that nonconforming use. And for the Planning Commission's background, a nonconforming use, it would be something that was previously allowed in that zoning district, and a code amendment occurred that no longer allows for that permitted use. Examples would be car lots along Prater Way. At one point, they were permitted use, and over time, the zoning codes changed, and the council or planning commissions determined they didn't desire that use anymore. So as long as those uses continue operation, they're grandfathered in, is the layman's term, a grandfathered in use. And this would extend that, the ability to continue your grandfathered use from 6 months to 2 years, if the planning commission chooses to move forward with that.
Jim?
Yes.
So the protections for nonconforming uses extend only to uses that were legally established, is that correct?
Yes. Yes, thank you. Yes, so it would be a use that was legally established, and it does say that in the definition of...
What would an illegally use be?
Illegally established uses are entitled to no protection at all. So if there was the permitted uses table in the zoning code spells out what the permitted uses for the particular zoning district are. If there was a use that was outside
that use,
that chart that was not legally established under a previous version of the code or the definition for the zoning district, that would be an illegally established use. For example, a particular type of business in a tourist commercial district that maybe didn't go there.
We have it, Commissioner Lean, more than we would like, but we have businesses set up operation and they don't obtain a business license. There's no guarantee that use is a permitted use in that district. Just because the city hasn't identified that they're operating without a business license, they would not get to enjoy the grandfather clause because they were never legally and lawfully established.
Okay.
On page 110 of the zoning code, Mayor Lee, can you hand out the... Yes, you guys already have the sheet, page 110. Staff is on, what's that?
Orange side.
Well, it's above that on its number 8 in the outdoor storage section component. Staff has identified that to do outdoor storage, you would have to obtain an administrative review. The administrative review, especially in the industrial area, is essential to providing staff the opportunity to identify flooding issues. We oftentimes, through our engineering division, help people come up with a evacuation plan to an extent of how to move their materials, how to get fences brought down so that they don't impede flood waters from getting out of the area. We've proposed identifying that Conex boxes or shipping containers are permitted in the industrial area. up to this point, code enforcement has always struggled as to whether or not the zoning code allows for Connex box, I call them Connex boxes, but the shipping containers, the freight carrying containers. So we are proposing to permit those through the administrative review process, as you see on your handout. We've proposed that you can't stack them vertically, and then we've proposed that they are, if you are storing materials in them, they're in association with the business to which they are being used for. So,
Jim, is
yes.
there any weight limit to the storage amount that would go into those containers?
No, we haven't proposed anything like that. And again, this is an errata sheet, I call it. It's not listed in the draft that you have, and that's why you have the handout. The next this is a smaller change. I did not provide a handout, but on page 128, we've identified a mechanism, the team has identified a mechanism for temporary use permits on items that we just can't foresee. So if you come in with Christmas tree sales, we've identified that happens often. If you come in with farmer's market, we've identified that happens often. But there are the temporary uses that we couldn't come up with. So this section I permits us to consider temporary uses for things that we didn't think of. And in number 1 there, under I, on the bottom of page 128, it says, where required, a temporary use permit application shall be submitted to the administrator at least 7 days prior to the proposed outdoor sale. I'd like to change the word outdoor sale there to the proposed temporary use. There's nothing to say it couldn't be inside, and there's nothing to say it has to be a sale. So we're proposing that it would remove outdoor sale, strike that, and replace it with temporary use. Regarding this item, this is an ordinance change to the Title 20. The Planning Commission acts in an advisory capacity to the Sparks City Council regarding this ordinance. When it votes, it will be making a motion, forwarding a motion to the City Council. Upon approval, thinking positively, I suppose, but upon approval of the City Council of this ordinance, the proposal would become effective and replace the existing Title 20. And that's part of the books that I brought today. This is a double-sided printed out copy of the Title 20 zoning code for the City of Sparks. This is the TOD Design Standards Manual. And then thirdly, this is a copy of the Design Standards Manual that everybody outside of a handbook and outside of the TOD would utilize for their design standards. For
Can I get rid of all those? Is this passes?
These are all being incorporated into the document that you have, which we believe creates for that predictability and in the zoning code where people can actually find items that they're looking for. So, do you have anything to add? So, based on my presentation, we've asked for to an extent an amended motion at this point of incorporating the illustration listed on the overhead projector, the incorporation of the amendment on page 110, and then the incorporation on page 128. Based on the testimony that was, and Angela and I will be here for any discussion as the Planning Commission moves forward with this item. But based on the testimony in the public hearing items at the beginning of tonight's Planning Commission meeting, the City Attorney, Chet Adams, is here today and would like to propose to the Planning Commission some additional information be incorporated into the zoning code. So at this time, if the Chairman Fulens would permit the City Attorney to provide a presentation to the Planning Commission.
All right. Mr. Adams.
Well, good evening. For the record, my name is Chet Adams. I'm your city attorney, and I am here tonight to present another proposed amendment to the Title 20 Code provisions. Now, along with my handouts to you, you've got a copy of a PowerPoint presentation, and you also have a proposed amendment to Title 20-03005, Sub C, concerning prohibited practices, non-domestic animals. Now, this ordinance was drafted to counteract the negative land use impacts that have been imposed upon the city of Sparks by Washoe County's animal control ordinances, which have created a feral cat colony program into perpetuity within the municipal jurisdiction of the city of Sparks. The reason this proposed amendment was not included in the Title 20 update process itself was due to Washoe County's recent unilateral adoption of its feral cat colony program with no meaningful notice ever being provided to the city of Sparks. Now, the second reason that this amendment is being presented to you is in response to Washoe County's position that the city's only recourse was to amend its zoning laws to prohibit feral cat colonies within the Sparks municipal boundaries. So that kind of gives you a little bit of background about why this is somewhat, not necessarily late, but why it was put in at this juncture. Because we really were left with no real choice by Washoe County. So what I have prepared for you is a PowerPoint. And who doesn't prepare PowerPoints these days? And in preparing this, and what I'm attempting to do here tonight is to educate the commission on not only what a feral cat colony is, but why those colonies have a negative impact on the surrounding uses and the surrounding properties that the feral cat colony exists within. Okay? Now, in preparing this, I chose these two pictures, one of the Sparks Marina and the other one of Paw Raw Park. And the reason I picked these pictures is that these are prime locations for feral cat colonies. And as I will get into a little bit more, these feral cat colonies have not only a negative impact, but they are dangerous. Okay? These feral cats can carry diseases. They attract animals that are potentially rabid. And when you combine those types of situations with people and with children, especially at the marina, especially at one of our parks that have access, easy vehicular access, which is something that feral cat colonies kind of depend upon because the people who manage and control those properties or those colonies must be able to get in, drop off food, drop off water, and an occasional additional cat or two as well. Okay? And I'll get into that a little bit more. I believe that zoning laws are appropriate for the governance of feral cat colonies. Now, in 2003, the city of Sparks joined with the city of Reno and entered into an interlocal agreement with Washoe County for Washoe County to assume all the animal control services regionally. And pursuant to that interlocal agreement, Washoe County was given the power to adopt animal control ordinances that apply to Sparks, Reno, and the entire county. And they can do this over Sparks' objections. Now, it's my position that Washoe County has adversely impacted Sparks' land use by legalizing a federal cat colony program. Now, this is enforced and administered by a nonprofit organization, the Nevada Humane Society. which has absolutely no contact with the city of Sparks, owes no legal obligations to the city of Sparks. Now, as your city attorney, I believe that the Sparks Charter gives us the legal authority to regulate land uses. Our zoning laws will protect citizens from feral cat colonies because they will trump the Washoe County Code provisions creating these colonies. The reason I believe that these are a dangerous land use, and I will support that through documented cases in here and studies, is that, first of all, the structures used in these colonies are unsightly, and they can be moved quickly to evade nuisance laws. There are caretakers, which are legally created entities by the Washoe County Code, have no legal or ownership responsibilities to our community, our businesses, or even to their own colonies. The food scattered throughout these colonies attracts potentially rabid animals into neighborhoods, into the business districts. And as our prior speaker indicated to you, our business districts are becoming more and more user-friendly for our citizenry. For soccer, not acrobatics, but gymnastics, bringing in more people, more adults, and more children. The feral cats and one of the biggest problems is that the feral cats from these colonies roam freely throughout the neighborhoods and throughout those business districts. And they create problems associated with smell, with damage to vehicles, with damage to property, noise, and, as I'll note later on, possible spread of diseases to our citizens. Okay, any questions so far?
Mr. Adams, I have a question. The city charter specifically authorizes the council it gives the council the power to plan and zone the city. Would you talk just a little bit more about why the city charter would trump the county ordinance and what the charter really operates as in the context of the city?
You could always ask me that in the office, but I'll be happy to answer here. The city charter is one of specific legislation. That is, as a specific legislative act, it will trump the general laws, the Nevada revised statutes, that are in conflict with the cities. And here, we don't even have an NRS, but what we have is a local code amendment by Washoe County. And actually, our charter will trump or will prevail over those provisions of Washoe County law.
Okay, Mr. Adams. So, I guess my question, Washoe County came up and they said, hey, we're not going to do anything about cat colonies, essentially. Correct? They're saying we are not going to do anything about them?
They said that we want to create a feral cat colony program to be administered by the Nevada Humane Society.
Okay.
And then they enacted some legislation pursuant to their animal control ordinances, which are creating that program and giving and they refer to Nevada Humane Society as any nonprofit humane group.
Okay. So right now, if somebody that lives in an apartment complex, and I think on your next slide will show a bunch of cats laying around that are a feral cat colony, somebody makes a complaint, where does that complaint go and how does that work through the system?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That complaint will be turned down by Washoe County Regional Animal Services. It will then be directed to the Nevada Humane Society. Depending upon the complaint. Now, that can be a single cat who is spraying, who is attacking children, who is attacking other pets. And Nevada Humane Society will simply tell you, the complainant, please come down and pick up one of our live traps. You go down to NHS, you pick up a trap, you attempt to catch the cat. Now, the cat may be, obviously, it'll be feral, it could be diseased, it could have all kinds of problems. But they expect you, an untrained private citizen, to now catch that cat in one of their traps, and then bring that cat, along with their trap, back to NHS. All right? NHS, being a private corporation, will have a list of the feral cat colony locations and the feral cat colony caretakers. But because they're private, that is not necessarily public information. We cannot make a Freedom of Information law request or a request under Nevada's public records law that they have to honor. They will then take that cat, and you heard reference made to trap, neuter, and release. They will then take that cat, and if it's not neutered or spayed, depending on the gender, they will then perform that procedure, and then they will take that cat and put it back into an established feral cat colony. That colony, by the way, may be next to your apartment. That colony may be next to your house, next to Paul Park. So there is really no alleviation of the problem. If you have a cantankerous cat, maybe he has an abscessed tooth, or maybe it has some other problem with it that makes it cantankerous. They don't address the abscessed tooth. They don't address the cantankerous nature of the cat. They simply turn it back into the community.
Mr. Adams, who bears the ultimate responsibility for the individual cats or the cat colonies?
I'm glad you brought that up. And I will address that, Mr. Thornley, in one of my subsequent slides. And thank you for bringing it, because I think that's a very, very important fact that you need to consider when looking at this overall issue. Who does bear overall responsibility? And as your attorney, I look for who bears legal responsibility. You drive down the road in your vehicle. You are involved with an accident. It is your responsibility if you were at fault because it's your vehicle and you were driving the car. That's what I mean about legal ownership and ownership responsibility. And how does that apply to this? Let's start from the beginning. Who can tell me what a feral cat is?
Untamed.
Untamed, very good. Washoe County Code defines what a feral cat is. And this is kind of important for you to look at because feral cat means a cat that's born into the wild or is a formerly owned cat. And I think that they meant domesticated, a formerly domesticated cat that had been abandoned and is no longer socialized. Now, take a look at that formerly owned or formerly domesticated language in there, okay? Now, how many feral cats are in Washoe County? Now, one of the partners to Nevada Humane Society is Community Cats. They estimate roughly 60 million homeless cats or feral cats in the United States. Out of that, 25,000 are within Washoe County. And the thing to emphasize here is that they estimate that most of those cats live in our populated areas, in our business districts, our industrial parks, our residential neighborhoods. So that's where those cats live, those 25,000 cats. Now, what is a feral cat colony? And I've put in 3 different photos for a couple of different reasons. First, you see the cats feeding on food that has been scattered around out there. And you can see on the bottom photo the food and water dishes that are put out in front of that temporary structure there that the cats are using. And when you look at the definition of a feral cat colony, remember that previous definition that I gave you about what a feral cat is? But now all of a sudden they've said, well, even if you have a domestic cat living in a feral cat colony. It will deem to be part of it. And that's an important distinction, folks. And the reason it's important is because it recognizes the fact that these feral cat colonies attract other cats. They attract domestic cats. And what happens when you start attracting domestic cats? Not only does a colony grow, exponentially impacting the negative impact on our community, but those other domestic cats start to overburden the colony, making it tougher for the others to survive. Those domestic cats may be cantankerous as it is, and they might start attacking these other cats. They may kill the kittens. But more importantly, it hurts the colony and those people trying to maintain it, which they have absolutely no control over. I've talked about temporary structures, and I've tried to give you just if you go online, you'll see these all over the place. But as you can tell, they are just there to provide some shelter. More importantly, though, you can see that they're very easily disassembled and moved. And I used the word migratory in there because I think that that's an important thing to do. Not only does it avoid our nuisance laws, but migratory means that if your colony starts to create a problem in your neighborhood, around your industrial park, you just pack it up and you move it to another area. Now, that other area may be an area that does not allow feral cat colonies. But when you take that colony out and put it into an adjoining area, and I've got a map later on, you're bringing all the problems, all the potential diseases, and all the bad things associated with the colony to that new location. Now, Washoe County Code has created the position of caretaker. These are the people responsible for feeding and watering and setting up these colonies. Okay? The sponsor on your right is essentially Nevada Humane Society. And these people have to go to Nevada Humane Society and say, I want to be a caretaker. And Nevada Humane Society says, okay, thank you very much. Where's your location? What are you going to do? How many cats you're going to have? And by the way, are you going to spay and neuter them and take care of them? Yes, I will. Thank you very much. Okay? Now, these are conscientious, good-hearted citizen volunteers. I'm not here to demean anybody or what it is that they are trying to do. But unlike our Washoe County animal control officers, who must be well-versed and experienced in how to handle feral animals and how to capture those animals, our caretakers are citizen volunteers with no formal animal training or experience. These are the people that will be taking care of these feral cat colonies in our community. And I've attached a slide, attend a workshop, get a T-shirt. Now you're a caretaker. As far as I know, that's about all you do need to become a caretaker. All the training, all the experience that you need. Now, getting back to Mr. Thornley's question to me, who bears legal responsibility for these colonies? You would think that the caretaker, the person charged with feeding and taking care of the cats and housing them, would have the legal responsibility. But oh no. Washoe County Code specifically exempts these people from any ownership responsibilities. The code specifically says owner does not include a feral cat colony caretaker. So what does that mean? They have no commitment to our community. They have no commitment to no legal commitment. We cannot enforce anything against these people because they're not owners. But an interesting quirk in the Washoe County law, if Chairman Fenwings owns a business and he has people out there with the feral cat colony, and he has said, hey, please move that colony off my business property, off the back of my business here. And they refuse to do that. The argument could be made under Washoe County's revised ownership laws that Commissioner Finland knew that those cats were being fed, allowed them to be fed, and so therefore, for purposes of this revised ownership ordinance, Chairman Finwins is the owner of these cats. You now have assumed legal liability, legal responsibility for that, simply because you knew about it. As I said earlier, because they have no ownership legal interest, they're not legally responsible for neglecting or abandoning their cat colonies. Photo on the left, kittens, dehydrated kittens in 85-degree weather. Photo on the right, of course, hungry and undernourished. Now, Nevada, Sparks, Northern Nevada is a transitory area. We have people moving in for school. We have people moving in for construction. We have people moving in for gaming. We may even have some people moving in, who knows, for Tesla. But the thing is that people move in and out, in and out. And while they're here, they may establish one of these feral cat colonies. But the thing is when they go to move, when they go home from school, what are they going to do with these colonies? Now, this is a screen grab from a Craigslist ad from a feral cat colony caretaker who said, listen, I'm moving out of the area. I need somebody to take over my colony. Now, I've got 6 cats over here, 2 of which are fixed, which implicitly tells me that 4 of them aren't. But they also point out in there that not only are we now feeding those feral cats, but now we've got skunks and raccoons being brought into that area. And I'll point out why that's an important and dangerous situation. Finally, these feral cat colony caretakers can be exploited by other cat owners, other members of our community who have got cats. Now, we're supposed to take our cats to Nevada Humane Society. And Nevada Humane Society will spay, neuter, inoculate. But that doesn't always happen, especially if they know that there's a feral cat colony right down the road from them in that park. So it's a lot easier for them to take their cats and dump them off in an existing colony. And we don't know if those cats have been spayed. We don't know if they've been neutered. We don't know if they have their rabies vaccination or anything else. But what we do know is that this is a common occurrence. And this is an article that I wanted to present to you showing how these people can be exploited. Here we've got a feral cat colony that was designed for 6 cats. Somebody dumps 25 off. What are you going to do? What condition were those 25 in? Now, we had a speaker earlier talking about some of the things she encountered as an animal control officer, I believe. And these are your typical nuisances that you see. And these are some articles, some news articles from 2012, 13, and 14 from various areas throughout the country. And we've got quite a few of them. But the cats, the number of cats are increasing, causing, more damage to not only people's property, but to vehicles. The second one is probably more indicative, the stench of urine. You've got cats out there creating all kinds of noises. Obviously, you've got a cat in heat every now and then, and that creates all kinds of cat fights and yelling, and I think the court refers to it as caterwauling. But you see cats that have been injured permanently through other cat fights with the other feral cats. And then finally, we've got one which is becoming more and more prevalent. This is out of Florida State College, where the students would keep the cats while they were in school, and then the school had built all these little cat boxes for shelter. And they had plants on them and everything else, and were painted real pretty and everything. But what the school was finding, and what the health district finally said, is that, look, you guys can't keep these cat colonies, these cat, and I know I can't say houses, but these cat structures here because for health reasons, because you're attracting all these other animals, what they call vectors. Vectors are simply a host of a disease, okay? So when you're talking about raccoons, skunks, squirrels, mice, you're talking about vectors, which these things bring in. As your lawyer, I felt compelled to provide you with at least one legal case. And this case is out of Montana, and it shows you the impact that a single feral cat colony had on an entire town. This guy had a cat colony of 30 to 40 cats. And the witnesses testified during these proceedings that about the offensive impact. The offensive impact that I'm trying to convey to you as to why you need to enact this proposed ordinance tonight. Once again, urine and feces polluted the neighborhood, destroying flower beds, lawns, shrubbery. Cat fights at night, dead cats being found, and what you will find is usually around feral cat colonies, you will see a higher incidence of dead cats. People hit them with cars. They're injured by dogs. They're injured by other cats. They're injured by these vectors that I was telling you about. So it's not uncommon to see a rise in the number of dead cats being found. Are those dead cats caused by what? By rabies? But nevertheless, the jury was so offended by this conduct, it only took them an hour to find this guy guilty of deliberately creating a nuisance. I've talked about rabies. The Center for Disease Control points out that cats are the main domestic animal linked to human exposure to rabies. How do these cats become infected with rabies? Skunks, like we've got skunks down there by the river. We've got raccoons down there by the river. These are the vectors that carry rabies. An infected cat may get in a fight with a skunk or a raccoon. Because when you put food out in the wild, you're going to get these kinds of animals coming to it naturally. It's a good, easy food source. So they're going to come to it. Unfortunately, their urine, their droppings, their saliva, all pass and transmit diseases. Cats also, a feral rabid cat will also infect another cat during a cat fight. Now, the photo on the right shows a fox biting a cat, a rabid fox biting a cat. And what that shows is how it impacts the lymph nodes into the muscles, into the spinal cord, and ultimately into the brain. Now, that takes a while to work its way. So you can have an infected cat, and this is typically what happens. You will have an infected cat that looks fine, that will purr and will cuddle up to you. Then all of a sudden, this cat will go absolutely nuts after the rabies has run its course and scratch or bite you, your kids. And I've got an example of how that happened here. Children are more susceptible to interacting with feral cats and contracting rabies. And you see the same process. But why are children more susceptible to it? A, they really don't have the training. They see a cute little kitty. But more importantly, you see a lot of these kittens out there. You see the feral cat kittens. And who doesn't want to play with a kitty? So these kids start playing with the kittens, and if those kittens are infected with just about any of these, either rabies, toxoplasma, cat scratch fever, the kids are going to become infected as well. Now, I've attached some other, a couple of other recent, as of last month, news articles showing how rabid cat attacks are on the rise. Now, the first one has to do with 6 people were treated after they tried to save a couple of cats that were thrown out of a moving vehicle. And that's nothing new. Good Samaritans see an injured kitty on the side of the road. They get out and they try and help it, only to get attacked by that cat. And the second one has, the second article has to do with the family. Mom and Dad, the cat came to their house on Christmas Day. They thought, hey, what a nice Christmas present. It was a stray cat, feral cat. They took it in, and it was just all lovey-dovey, snuggling with Mom, and next thing you know, Mom was attacked by this, what turned out to be a rabid cat. And not only Mom and Dad had to go through this rabies process, which is a series of shots over an extended length of time, but very painful. And their children, there's 6 children, ages 4 to 14, all had to go through the same procedure as well because of one rabid cat. What I've tried to do here is to present to you, the map on the right shows those jurisdictions that have enacted what we call the trap, neuter, release, trap and neuter, return programs. All of those use feral cat colonies as an integral part of their program. And those jurisdictions on the right and a little bit on the left, the map on the left shows you the reported rabies cases in those areas. And I think you can tell by just simply looking at the map that those jurisdictions that have effective that have TNR programs also have a higher incidence of rabies. And remember the lady pushing the cart? The migratory person? This is what happens when you start migrating away from your original colony. Okay? Toxoplasma gondii is a blood-borne disease. It's actually considered to be a leading cause of death attributed to foodborne illnesses in the United States, specifically targeting, probably having the most impact, the most proven impact on pregnant women. Because of this is a photo of a child infected with this. However, what scientists are now finding and what veterinarians are now telling us, let me say this. This is how it's spread. Obviously, these feral cat colonies attract a host of outside vectors. Mice, squirrels, those kinds of things. In the slide on your left, it shows how cats, and infected cats, through its stool, mice will eat the stool. Mice become affected, then another cat will eat the mice. That's one way of being affected. But an infected cat, as the slide on your right shows you, can infect through its feces animals. When that food is eaten by a pregnant woman, it's called congenital transmission. She can pass it on to her child, as we saw in the prior photo. And if she has any type of organ transplant, blood transfusion, anything like that, with an immediate family member, it can be passed as well. Here is something I found interesting. And this is what this Toxoplasma gondii does to the brain. It creates lesions, okay? Those lesions are now being associated with schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. There's a 2015 study just this month, Stanley Medical Research Institute. Now, you've got to admit, I try and bring you the most up-to-date stuff here, right? But what they're saying is that people with schizophrenia, many of them had cats as children. And many veterinarians now, at least, and we're seeing it more and more, are saying that this Toxoplasma gondii that cats are infected with are leading to higher rates of schizophrenia and bipolar disorder with who? The homeless. Because in many of these feral cat colonies, all you have to do is go down by the river, folks. And you're going to see feral cat colonies by the river alongside these homeless camps. And these homeless people, you get hungry, what are you going to do? These people have been known to be eating these cats for food. And an infected cat will now pass that on to the person who ate it, and now they run an extremely high risk of this. Finally, we've got the old cat scratch fever. Again, most frequently in children under 15, particularly kittens, playing with the kitties. Anybody that you've known, or if you've ever contracted this, then you know how painful it can be and how long it seems to last. Because Washoe County has enacted its animal control ordinances, Sparks has no current legal ability to control feral cat colonies. The only way we can do that begins with the commission tonight.
Mr. Evans, if I could interrupt for a second. Does Title 20, does the zoning code presently regulate the location of animals within the city of Sparks?
It does on some, not necessarily the location. It does regulate high-risk species, such as skunk, raccoons, foxbats, coyotes, badger, and bobcats.
What about livestock, poultry, bees, cows?
Thank you. The proposed code does, in fact, attempt to regulate that. It recognizes that, and that's why this particular amendment is not necessarily out of line with what you were already doing with the bees and the poultry. Okay? Did that answer your question, sir?
It does. But it carries over that regulation from the existing code as well. I want that to be
absolutely
clear for the record.
And I apologize for that. I saw Mr. Thornley's name tag over there, and I got confused. I didn't know where I was sitting. As I pointed out earlier, and I'm not going to reiterate this again and bore you with this, but Washoe County, Washoe Regional Animal Control Services will not collect nuisance or combative feral cats. The Assistant Director, these are his comments, Mr. Bobby Smith, before the Washoe County Board of County Commission a year ago today. Now, I don't know about you folks. Maybe Commissioner Sanders, you've got a different view on this, but I always thought cats and dogs were animals. And I thought that as an animal control agency, you would want to control animals. Mm-hmm. But what Mr. Smith said is that, oh, no. Feral cats are considered free roaming cats and not animals. So therefore, we're not going to pick those up. Who said that? Bobby Smith, the Assistant Manager of Washoe County Animal Services. During his comments to the Washoe County Board of County Commission on 10/14/2014, sir. And he also told the board that it's Nevada Humane Services, not Washoe County, who is responsible for managing, and I think that gets back to your question, Mr. Chairman, as to who is responsible for running this program. Neither NHS nor feral cat colony caretakers have any legal obligations in regards to any of this. We can't sue them. We cannot hold them accountable. And Washoe County, the Assistant Director has already said, we ain't going to do it. You call NHS, they'll give you a trap. Oh, and by the way, if you damage that trap, you're going to have to pay for it too. Instead, the burden is placed. I think I've already done that. Now, what happens? What happens when we don't have an enforcement mechanism? What happens when government fails to enforce or otherwise remove a nuisance? Well, if government ain't going to do anything, I'm going to take care of the problem my own self. And that's one of the last slides that I put in there. But the problem with NHS running it is that they are a private nonprofit organization. They are a contractor with Washoe County. They are not part of our interlocal agreement with Washoe County. They are an independent legal entity whose corporate goals and purposes conflict with Sparks City Charter, which is intended to protect the citizens through our zoning ordinances. NHS has no legal, fiscal, or fiduciary duties or obligations to either the citizens of Sparks or the Sparks businesses. NHS's programs are 100% dependent upon charitable contributions. That means that their programs, such as the feral cat colony program can become underfunded, it can be non-existent. Their facilities could be underfunded, become non-existent. It's not like government. We're obligated to comply with the Nevada ethics law, the open meeting laws, but the good thing is that we have tax revenues. So we have a relatively, we can count on a revenue stream. It may fluctuate, but unlike these people, they could lose everything. When recourse to alleviate, this is what I was talking about. The government's not going to do anything. We're going to take it into our own hands. And what you've got here is this was actually a veterinarian who posted this on one of her, I don't know if it's a social media. And she had actually shot a feral cat with an arrow. Now, I don't know if we have any veterinarians in the office, but the veterinarians I've talked to have told me that this particular, because there's blood here, indicates that the cat was probably caught in a leg trap first and then shot in the head with an arrow. And the fact that the cat's arms are sticking out means that the cat was still alive when this picture was taken.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the kind of cruelty that is now being besieged upon these poor feral cats, because these feral cat colonies have gotten out of control. Finally, and I pointed out early on, this was not part of the Title 20 update process, but I think you can tell by the various articles here that it is not a program that is appreciated throughout the country by various communities. The 2012 article out of Georgia, in 2010, they had originally started a feral cat program, and they said, folks, if you want your cats spayed or neutered, come on in, we'll pay for it. Well, nobody took advantage of that. And yet their feral cat colonies continued to grow, and the problems just increased. So they finally said, if nobody's going to take advantage of our program, we're pulling our funding. So that gives you a little background on that particular story. But I've tried to cite all of these in case you want to look them up independently. My final slide is simply a plea to you to understand the damages, the dangers to our community created by these feral cat colonies, and that Washoe County has not only abdicated its enforcement, has it abdicated its obligation to protect the community by simply giving this over to a nonprofit organization to enforce. Abdicated it by making the policy decision that we are not going to collect feral cats and try and do away with that program, or try and protect people from that program. But to use our zoning laws to protect our citizens, to protect our businesses from these occurrences that have, history repeats itself, that have been going on in other communities. And finally, those communities are standing up and saying, we don't want this anymore. And I'm asking you to to include this proposed ordinance in your package, so we don't have to go through this because of the negative impacts that this has on our lands, not only to the temporary structures, the free roaming cats, high risk attracting of high risk species, but I would submit that the health, safety, and welfare of our community depends upon the governance of feral cat colonies. That governance falls within the philosophy and the jurisdiction of our zoning laws and should be included in the revisions to Title 20 of the Sparks Municipal Code.
Mr. Adams, I have
Yes.
a question for you. Let's assume that we adopt this, and there are these colonies set up. And so how do we get rid of them? And then someone says, oh, Sparks, you don't like that? I just put it over here they'll put another one here. What can be done about the ones that exist, and what can be done to stop people from just establishing new ones?
You know, and I've thought about that too, because I always tell people like Mr. Thornley, don't come into me with a problem unless you've already worked out a solution to it, and we can discuss that. NHS, their corporate policy is what they call no kill. They go out of their way to try and collect these feral cats. And as part of the zoning code, our code enforcement officers, with their, I'm sure you've heard about those legendary fluorescent orange stickers, all they need to do is go out and put a sticker on one of these temporary structures. They give me a call. I call NHS, and I say, look, NHS, you know who owns that structure. It's violating our zoning codes. And I'm going to tell you something. I'm going to give you a break here. You can either come out and collect those structures or tell your feral cat colony caretaker to put their structures on that Home Depot cart and move it out of here. Or we're going to move it out of there for you. Now, all their due process rights have been preserved. And, of course, I would follow that up with a letter and a location to give them notice that we are about to seize their property. And if they want to follow up on their corporate purposes, they will come out and they will take care of that problem for us. Because we cannot, as we know, we cannot count on Washoe County Regional Animal Control Services to do that. So, to me, that's a good way of doing it. Now, what they're probably going to do, Commissioner Sanders, is take that colony and just move it into Reno. All right? Now, is that going to protect the citizens and the businesses of Sparks? As I told you, there is a migratory effect. It will probably afford us a little higher level of protection. But I'll go out on the limb here today. And I'll make a prediction that it's not going to be too long before the city of Reno starts experiencing some of the same problems that these other communities have experienced because of their allowance and the way they have embraced this feral cat colony program.
Well, as a follow-up, how do we then protect our our code enforcement officers who are going out there to this place with all these animals?
Exactly.
With no training.
Exactly. They do not have the training. Don't touch the cats. Don't pet the cats. Don't do what I'm doing, picking up and petting a burning dog by bringing this to you. But leave the animals alone. We're going to have to leave it to their discretion. We have some pretty sharp people over there. Look, if you can get in there safely, put it on there. If not, don't worry about putting a sticker on. Give me the location, take a picture, and I'll take care of it from there. I don't think, legally speaking, we need to actually put a sticker on that. As long as we have notice and we provide NHS, and we obviously provide Regional Animal Services with notice as well. But I have no problems, regardless of what the law says, prosecuting these people. Sir.
Mr. Adams, are there any metrics out there that would show increases in, say, these public health risks that have been cited, such as rabies, cat scratch fever? And in a local sense, are we seeing increases reported?
I don't know, to answer your question, I don't know locally. I know that we had a rabid bat reported here, just a couple of weeks ago, something like that. But the problem that comes in is with the reporting itself. And are those reports being generated, and are they being published? Who publishes those? Who does that? Is it the health district? Oh, by the way, the health district, who does have a rabies program, right? Now, we've all of us who have animals, we know that we got to go down and we give our animals a rabies shot. But that's not enough, is it? We got to go in, give them boosters, right? Well, that's what the Washoe County rabies policy declares. These feral cat colonies are not part of that policy. You can give a cat one shot, supposedly lasting for 3 years. But that shot is going to take, 28, 26 days to take effect. The cat can be affected during that time. And after 3 years, if the cat is still alive, they're not going to get any of those boosters. They're not going to get any of those annual boosters like we give our animals. And how are you going to catch all the cats in this colony to give them a rabies shot? When you got cats coming in all the time and going out all the time, how are you going to really enforce our rabies laws? Laws that really are not applicable to feral cat colonies.
I have one other follow-up question.
Thank you.
Let's say we get rid of all those cat colony things, but you got some folks who said, oh, these poor kitties. They're starving, they're thirsty. I'm going to feed them anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So what do we do if there's no colony, but I'm going out every day making sure that these cats have food and water because I'm a good person? What do we do with that?
Actually, that is a problem, and that is like a pseudo, if you can use that, colony, because those cats now start. And if you look at what you have a feral cat colony without the temporary structures, okay? And these people are supposed to be turning those feral cats into the Humane Society. I've got these cats. But is it going to do away with it? No. Are people going to continue to do that? Yes. There are just a lot of people out there that share the sentiments that you just expressed. These poor cats, they're hungry. There's snow on the ground, maybe. But it's raining, they're miserable. I'm going to start feeding them. Obviously, I spent some time on this issue. And I was talking to a young man from Fernley. His neighbors were doing that. They were leaving the garage door up a little bit and letting those cats come in and out until a thief decided to crawl under their garage door and get into their home and clean them out. There's all kinds of problems associated with that. None of us in government can ever pass a law that will affect or change human sentiment, human nature. All we can do is try and address a known problem and say we don't want that problem in our community. Sparks is unique. Sparks has a quality of life that we want to protect. Enforcement, folks, how many times do you hear people talking to the legislature? We need a law to do this, we need a law to do that. But the problem always comes down to enforcement. And yes, is that a problem? Absolutely. But at least we've got something to go on here. And when we see these people, we can say, look, why don't we get these cats over to the NHS? Why don't we do something here? You don't need it, because that person, if they're living in an apartment, they're going to be moving. And then what's going to happen to those cats? You know? Sir?
I've got just a couple questions. The Title 20 overhaul has been roughly about a year process. A lot of stakeholders have been involved in it, and essentially the Title 20 overhaul, by what Mr. Reynolds said earlier, was to involve some quick fixes, some barriers to development, to improve the predictability for the essentially businesses moving into Sparks. My question is this really a zoning issue? And I know you're saying, is it? Yes, we can then trump some things with the zoning issue. I really don't think that it maybe is a zoning issue. I'm a little bit wondering why it's brought in, and I know you're speaking of Washoe County on the essentially the 11th hour, where stakeholders have not had some ability to talk about it. Staff, I don't know if they've had a chance to look at it on this year project that's happened. I know during our study session, this was not brought forward. And honestly, and the ladies have spoke earlier about there being a feral cat issue. I don't know, I personally haven't seen, the one that you've seen that was posted on Craigslist is very close to my office, and I know if anybody ever puts a structure on my land, I'm going to know about it. Also, when you say a permanent structure, is that if some lady down the street decides to put some put a thing of cat food outside of her house, and all of a sudden they have 10 cats around there, again, how are we going to enforce that? We have a new enforcement thing that passed in January, that started on January with landscaping and different things, that has a mediation component to it. Is this going to be brought in with that? And my second, and I'm throwing a lot of questions at you. Has Washoe County Planning done anything on this? Has Reno Planning done anything on this? Which doesn't sound like they have. So it's just kind of, you're saying, hey, if we do it first, then they'll adopt it later on. But has it been brought forth in their planning?
Okay, thank you. Let me answer your last question first. The answer is no and no. Neither Reno nor Washoe County has been given an opportunity to address this. I did not mean to imply, and if I did, I apologize, that if we pass this, Reno and Washoe County will now look at it from the zoning aspect. I cannot speak to that or for them, okay? What I am saying, though, is that our zoning ordinances already address animals, and they're going to address animals again. The year-long process, I think, was an excellent process. And the stakeholders that you talked to and the interests that you addressed during that stakeholder process had to do primarily with commercial, had to do primarily with our maps, had to do primarily with all of the things that Mr. Rundle pointed out. It didn't necessarily have much to do, if anything, to do, with the exception of your bees and poultries, with animals. And it certainly didn't have anything to do with the dangers associated with those kinds of animals that the code already addresses. That is the skunks and the raccoons, fox, bats, and coyotes. And all this really is adding one more category to a line that has already been recognized by this commission and ultimately by the city council. And obviously, had we known a year ago that this was coming about, then we certainly could have been part of this. But I'm trying to bring this to you as quickly as possible in order so we can, for us to address this before those colonies start being established in our community pursuant to the Washoe County Code.
If I might add to that, Title 20 is routinely used by the city to regulate the impacts of intentionally created conditions, whether it's related to commercial lighting, whether it's related to hours of operation. Those are zoning issues that are frequently mitigated through the implementation of conditions by this body or the city council via the authority contained in Title 20. This is no different. It's not the same as a nuisance that is a unique and oftentimes unintentional condition. This is an intentionally created condition that directly impacts the adjacent properties and should be mitigated and regulated through the zoning code.
But we've got an interrelated agreement with Washoe County.
Interlocal?
Interlocal agreement with Washoe County that now says that Nevada Humane Society is going to help eradicate this issue. So you put a sticker on the temporary structure, and you call them and you say, hey, come clean it up, and they don't. You had a slide about Mr. Zimmerman lawsuit in Montana. So he got, what's the ramifications to Mr. Zimmerman?
We don't have, to Mr. Zimmerman?
Yeah, I mean, did he, did he get fined? Did he have any things that could, hurt him, so to speak?
He was fined?
Like having the bad sign. You get, I'm guessing if you're found out of compliance in zoning code, you have to pay, fines or whatever the case is. But even if you put a sticker on it and they say, hey, we're not going to do anything about it, right now you're saying we have no recourse at all, and this will give us a recourse to go for fines and so forth?
This should give us a recourse, to go against, to go for fines, and I don't have any problems going against the administrator of the program. In this case, if it's NHS, I don't have a problem doing that. Look, we're trying to cooperate with you here, but you're allowing a dangerous condition to exist in our community. So yes, I will go against them for a fine. In Mr. Zimmerman's case, he was ordered to remove the cats not only from the area that he was feeding them in, but his own house. But that's because he was an owner. That's because they recognize ownership liability, which Washoe County Code doesn't. So it becomes a very slippery slope for all of us in order to enforce it. As it stands now, I have absolutely no leg to stand on, nothing to look at, but once it's put in the code, I now have something at least to go forward with. Did that answer your question, sir?
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm curious about the negative public publicity of fining a nonprofit.
Sure.
You know, and how do we look when we go after NHS and some editorial comes out there and say, well,
you know, and as your city attorney, I've had to prosecute, I've had to defend, I've been involved in some cases that have not always brought the city into the greatest light. And I cannot really worry about what kind of a light is that going to potentially put us in. And I found that the press, regardless of who I've gone after for a legal nuisance or who's sued us, generally accepts the fact that it is my job to protect the public health, safety, and welfare of all those in our community. And when I go against prosecute somebody who is known in the community, who is well liked in the community, but they've made a mistake as far as a DUI or domestic battery, I can't worry about those kinds of things. And as a governmental entity, face it, we are going to get hit every now and then by those editorials. But I'd much rather get a negative editorial for doing the right thing, trying to protect my constituents, than get an editorial like I think that Washoe County is now subject to for abdicating its responsibilities to protect its community by just classifying these animals as free roaming and giving up on it. I would like to thank you for your patience. Thank you for your time. I know it was an extended presentation, and I didn't mean to give you a year's worth of workshop information in one setting, but thank you so much, and I would appreciate your consideration of this.
Thank you for this excellent report. I will never look at a cat the same.
It's kind of illuminating, isn't it? It really brings up a lot of things that I know I wasn't aware of. Feral cat problems, and I'm going, what is that? And but once I get looking into it, and there's a lot more than what I've presented to you tonight. Thank you so much.
Well, this is a public hearing item. So if anybody from the public would like to come up speak, please sit and give your name.
For the record, Regina Perry, citizen of Sparks since 1972. And I'll play the movie first this time. Because I think people picture 2 or 3 kittens. That isn't what we're talking about, okay? And this says it better than I do. If this doesn't play, I brought it with me on the camera. This is a wahoo.
All right, welcome back. This could be a debate that never ends. Should feeding feral cats lead to being fined?
A city lawmaker who wants to cut down on the walking stray cat numbers is talking about just that. KITV4's Brenton Awad tells us why.
They know it's dinner time. Mark Hanna's been taking care of cats here in Hawaii Kai for more than 20 years. To say he loves these animals is an understatement. To say they're invasive to Hawaii, he says, is flat out wrong.
And we understand that they don't understand.
as far as they're concerned, we're just contributing and perpetuating the problem, and we're not. We're actually managing the problem.
The problem is the population of stray cats, which seems to be on the rise. A local group wants the city to get rid of them for good.
They're peeing on people's yards, walking all over their cars, pooping in their grass, and those are a risk as well as just a pain in the butt. They wish that they had more detail.
City Council member Trevor Ozawa's heard the complaints. He says it's time to do something.
But when you're going to this park and ride, and a bunch of people are going there, and we get up into the 300s with cats, that's a problem that the city has to start addressing.
While there's no clear plan of action to address the issue just yet, there are ideas.
We need to also maybe look at making stiffer penalties for those that are continuing to contribute to a public nuisance of this magnitude.
Because they're just simply not true.
Those who keep taking care of these cats claim they're not the problem. They say they're controlling the cat population by making sure all of these animals are spayed or neutered. They agree with stricter penalties, but they say those fines should go to the people who keep adding new cats to the crowd.
That's what we're finding is one of the biggest problems of the population. We're controlling it, and people, by dropping their cats off, are adding to it.
City Council member Ozawa told us he wants to schedule a meeting between lawmakers, the people who care for the feral cats, and the Humane Society and other agencies to try to come up with a plan to control Oahu's stray cat population. No word yet on when that meeting could take place.
I don't know how to
All right,
do
welcome
that.
back. This could be a debate that never...
How do you turn that off? I don't want to try to talk over that.
We can hear you if you talk to the microphone.
One of the things that I wanted you to notice that the majority of those cats in there, for one thing, what do you think that business owner, what about that strip mall owner? Did he probably think that was a good idea? I wouldn't. If I were a business owner in that parking lot, I would not think that was a good deal. Okay? If you have any questions, you can, of course, ask me. I'm part of a group of 18,967 people nationwide who are cleaning up and seeing the mess that this is creating. The communities that they're touting as being successful, every day across my feed, I get between 25 and 30 per day of communities that are trying to back out. We don't codify drunk driving. We don't codify speeding. We don't codify spousal abuse and say, well, you can beat your wife to death if we make it okay. No. We're drawing wild animals in. Endow says it's a bad idea. And somebody asked, I think it was you, sir, will our zoning law stand up? Will it be authoritative? Paul Liparelli, the head of the Civil Division for Washoe County, said, if Sparks wants these gone, Ardina, because he called me, and he goes, I don't want you getting this repealed, which I do have a complaint filed with the state attorney's judgment right now, which is under things. But anyway, the short form is, if you want anything, my number's on the bottom of the other handout. I'll give you guys a couple of these just to share. I didn't print enough to go around. Okay. But please consider this, because we have an opportunity to stop it before it turns into that. And very quickly, a business owner, told him to please remove the cats. And this ties into your question, ma'am. The business person on Coney Island confronted the cat feeder, asked him to remove the cats or she would call animal control. The cat feeder laughed and said it was illegal and AC would not respond. She then called AC and was told they no longer furnished traps nor picked up cats. When this business owner took down, when they took down the Tupperware Village, I am tying this to Chet's thing. When they took down the Tupperware Village, they came back and spray painted this lady's business with cat hater all over her business, with spray paint. What I'm saying to you is what we would do with this type of an action is this person would no longer be able to say, it's legal, get out of my face. That's what we would be doing with that. That's the point that I was hoping to make.
Thank you very much.
I hope that video, I got 3 gray hairs over that video, people. And if you want to share this with other folks, you can. It's just what I said for the record. And I enjoyed you, but would you talk a little louder? I'm old.
Good evening. Thank you. For the record, my name is Ken Crater. I'm a local engineering, planning consultant, and land developer. I've done many, many projects in Sparks through the years, and I have nothing to add on feral cats. But this is great timing. This is long past due, and I'm so thrilled that this is finally coming to fruition. And it is great timing because we've all heard the stories, EDON, 50,000 jobs coming over the next 5 years. Well, if you look at 2.6 people per job, which is per the 2010 census, that's 128,500 new people potentially moving to our area in the next 5 years, maybe it's 8 years. But based on the shares of Sparks, Reno, and Washoe County, we're looking at perhaps 27,000 new residents in Sparks over, say, the next 5 to 8 year period. So having this new code in place to ensure the quality of development in Sparks is absolutely great timing, and it won't break my heart one bit to go from 3 documents and manuals to 1. And what I really like about this is it's very well organized, it's easy to find stuff in the table of contents, so I have to commend staff for all the work they did in putting this together, as well as you folks for all the time you spent in reviewing it, because with that number of residents, we're looking at potentially 10,500 new homes in Sparks in this short period of time. And again, it's great timing. But I just have a couple of comments that I'd like to make. First of all, on page 9, residential setbacks, it's great that we're allowing for flexibility in the setbacks. If we have a 30-foot combined front and rear setback, you can do it at 10 and 20 or 15 and 15. But maybe you want to think a little bit about going as little as 7.5 feet on the front yard setback. I don't know if you watched the Warriors and the Cavaliers play basketball in the last week, but the Cavaliers center, he could barely lay down in that 7.5-foot front yard setback. Maybe 10 was more appropriate. And then also important, and this is great, it allows for porches to encroach in that front yard setback. And I'm a true believer that I would love to see Sparks become one of the most walkable communities in the western United States. I think that would be very cool to have that mantra for the city of Sparks. But I want to make sure it's clear that that doesn't allow that 5-foot porch to encroach in a 7.5-foot setback. It calls out a minimum, but maybe that needs to be clarified so we don't end up with a 2.5-foot setback. So that's one issue. Another is parking reduction for affordable housing. If you look at affordable housing, there's the area median income, and typically you're looking at either a 0 to 30% AMI or a 40 to 60 AMI. And a 40 to 60 AMI is a typical bracket for the home funds, and that's the majority of affordable housing projects that come forward in our communities. When you're in the 0 to 30% AMI, it's very difficult to get projects done because there's no stability in income, and unless there's some type of voucher system, that 40 to 60 really governs. So I would like to see that 45% that's noted on page 224 raised to 60% to fit with the AMI. And the reality is projects like that will have a range of incomes. It won't be everybody at 60 or everybody at 50. It'll be a range of folks between 40 and 60. And a lot of those projects will even set aside 1 or 2 units at 0 to 30% AMI. But I'd hate to see an affordable housing project not be able to get a reduction in parking because of that 45% number that's called out, and it requires a study. And so the study is going to be required regardless, so hopefully that'll verify what sort of parking should be allowed for that affordable housing. But if we want to get more affordable housing in our community, which we do, there's a huge need for it, then I think we need to accommodate with that 40 to 60% AMI. Okay. And then my last comment is on page 230. I would love to see Sparks get rid of compact parking stalls. Maybe if you live somewhere where everybody has a small car, but we live in a community with a lot of trucks and SUVs, and in fact, if you read the news lately with the decrease in gas prices, truck and SUV sales have skyrocketed. And I have done a lot of projects where there's complaints from tenants and from customers with compact stalls because there's not enough parking, only because there's no cars left that fit in those compact stalls. And when I design and develop a project, I actually exceed parking requirements for layout. I will actually add an extra foot, for example, onto the aisle to make sure it's easy and convenient for customers to get in and out. And plus, how many people have had a door dinged by the car next to you because the stall's too small? So I think it would be great just to get rid of compact stalls. I think it makes for a more efficient parking lot design, and I think it's right there with what we want to achieve, which is high-quality projects within the city of Sparks. That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Can I make a comment back to the...
Absolutely.
This will be just real quick again. This is...
You say your name again?
Romeo.
I'm sorry. Okay.
Yeah, with Sparks, or resident of Sparks. When the talk came up about the feeding of feral cats and how it attracts other things, I have that situation going on right now. As I told you, my neighbors are doing the trap, neuter, and return, but they're putting cat food out, including on their patios. Right next to me is cat food and water and stuff for the ferals. And just recently, one night, there are 2 raccoons over there eating the cat food. And of course, raccoon feces carries roundworm and that sort of thing, which is a danger to anybody. And there are children in the complex where I live. They're playing on the grass and so forth. So just want to bring that up. The other thing that also has gone on just in the last few days with the cats that live next to me and the ferals that are coming in, I've found 3 dead birds, all obvious victims of cat attacks. There was a pigeon, a dove, and a robin. And in the case of the robin and the dove, those are protected species. And I know INDA talked extensively about the problem with feral cats and so forth decimating the bird populations. And I'm just one person living in one place, and in 2 or 3 days I've got 3 dead birds. I can't imagine what the impact is citywide for Sparks. It must be tremendous. That's all I had to say. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Anybody else from the public? Okay. Seeing none, close public comment and bring it back to commission.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, could Jim Rendell come back up, please? Jim, I know it's not much time. I know Ken Crater was speaking, but can you address the 7.5-foot setbacks and about the porch and 5-foot porch in that, first of all?
Well, if the, let me address it this way. I'd like to understand the sentiment of the commission to see if they can appreciate those comments. Personally, I can. But if they do, I'd like to take a recess so that I can draft something. I don't want to draft it here on the fly without conferring with some of the other.
No, yeah, I agree. I just thought you might just have a quick answer.
I don't have a quick answer, except that I think they're reasonable perspectives.
Okay, and just one other one that concerns me. He was talking about the compact cars and the parking stalls.
Yeah, on that one, I can appreciate being a northern Nevadan and the size of vehicles that we see. One of the directions of the City Council was to provide for flexibility in the zoning code. Market conditions oftentimes dictate what type of parking spaces or what type of landscaping or what type of building materials someone should utilize. It's my opinion that part of the foundation of the development of this code was to provide flexibility to developers so that they didn't always have to come back and ask for major deviations or amendments to the code. I guess you could make a case that removal of the ability to do compact spaces does affect people, parking in them and the door dings and that kind of thing. But you could, the other side of the coin would be that you are reducing a flexibility potentially to the development of a site, and sometimes the compact space does help us to have the flexibility to make a site work.
I agree with you 100%. One other thing, our city attorney, Chet Adams, came up and gave a great presentation. How do we add that into the zoning code, the new code?
Did City Attorney Adams give you a handout?
Yes. Yes, it's
Yeah. It was on
proposal.
20.03.005 animals. So we can amend that with...
Does it have a number on it? Okay.
Section C, prohibited practices, non-domestic animals.
In my initial presentation, I had proposed that the Planning Commission discuss a few additions or errata sheets to the zoning code. This essentially serves as an errata sheet.
Okay.
If the Planning Commission discusses and makes a motion, the motion would say to include the errata sheets as proposed by staff, including the...
As amendment.
The, I guess, feral cats proposal.
Prohibited practices, non-domestic animals.
Mm-hmm. And then the staff, we will incorporate that into the draft that ultimately goes forward to the City Council.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, if I might proceed real quick, I'd just like to thank Jim Lindo and all his staff when we met with the presentation, that you gave us a chance in there to see the new zoning. And as I mentioned before, one thing I liked about it, it's very user-friendly. I mean, you can pick it up and you already know what you're looking for. You created a master table in there, which is something we never had before.
Right.
You reduced Title 20 from 103 to 9 chapters. I mean, that's, you're going through 103 and you get lost in about, 89th. You're down to 9. So, I mean, I'm very well impressed with this, and I think any builder, whoever comes in will get it, and he'll just say that this. You're going to have other people calling you and ask you how you did it, what you're going to do. Other cities are going to say, this is unbelievable. And I appreciate all the work you've done and everybody that's helped you.
Well, thank you, Commissioner Lehman.
Yeah.
That's, as outlined in the numerous times in the staff report, it was a team. And I get to sit up here right now, but a lot of the team's here, and a lot of it isn't. But the team that isn't here, the stakeholders, I'm going to put a positive light on it and say they don't feel like they need to be here to oppose anything. The public comment from Mr. Crater, he talked to me about it last week, and I invited him to come in and inform the Planning Commission of his comments as well. Because at that point, we didn't have time to address that in the draft. The draft had been sent out. Thank you, though, Commissioner.
Oh, you
I
bet.
appreciate that.
And with that, unless any other commissioner have any comments, I'd like to make a motion.
Well, I think we need to take a little 5-minute recess before.
Okay, that's fine.
So if we could convene at 8:30, 8:25.
Commissioner Funes, if we could have a few more minutes.
Okay, 8:30, 10 minutes, 15 minutes?
10, why don't we say 10 if it's okay
Okay.
with the commission, and if staff feels any more, then we will allow
Okay,
it.
we'll reconvene at 8:35.
Thank you.
You're done.
ever wonder what it takes to turn this into this, or this, or this?
Okay, I'll just sit down and shut up.
Thank you.
That's mine. Why did you care that? These American family have cat fight insurance.
Yeah, it's liability.
Interesting.
All right, looks like it's 8:35, so we're ready to reconvene. And I think we were left at Mr. Rundle.
Thank you, Chairman Fenway. After discussing it with staff, what we decided is probably the best way for the Planning Commission to move forward would be, as I explained in the initial presentation, the Planning Commission is in its advisory capacity today on this item. If you would like staff to research this and vet it, we can include that proposal to the City Council, whether it be to recommend that we change that or to not recommend the change. And we can address all what I counted to be 3 policies that Mr. Crater brought up. But that way we'll have some technical analysis. We can include it in the staff report and potentially include it as a component of the code, or potentially not include it, but provide rationale as to why we're not. And that's my recommendation to the Planning Commission on how we move
And I
forward.
agree with you, I'll go with the latter on that one.
So on.
Yeah.
Jim, and then you want to just remind them on the errata sheets?
Yeah, and just to reiterate, since we've had the break and a very long item, the staff proposed, what is my estimate, 4 errata sheets. The proposed change that I put up on the overhead projector regarding the building envelope to be included in Chapter 2, and then the changes to the page numbers that we outlined regarding the Connex or the freight containers, and the amendment to the temporary use permit, and then the proposal from the City Attorney Adams regarding the feral cats issue to go in the animal ordinance section. And I count those to be 4 amendments that staff is proposing that the Planning Commission include in their motion.
Okay. Any discussion? All right. Ready for a motion?
Yeah,
Well, we closed public comment, didn't? Yeah. Okay, thank you.
I move to forward a recommendation of approval to the City Council of the code amendment associated with CA-1-15 with extending amendments on page 10, storage containers, on page 128, temporary use permits, and the new document code on page 7, I believe it was, with the 20.03.005 animals, C, prohibited practices and non-domestic animals included.
Second.
Okay, the motion and a second. Any more discussion?
Commissioner Fewens, and just a suggestion, Commissioner Lean, that staff vet the public hearing components regarding the 3 items that were brought up by Mr. Crater. If you would like us to do that, that would be part of the motion, too.
I would not like that to be part of the motion.
Okay.
If I might clarify before the Commission discusses the motion. Commissioner Lean, as I understood it, your motion was approval of the code amendment, including all 4 errata sheets proposed by staff.
Yes.
Thank you.
Can you document those 4 sheets again, please? 110.
One was the, on the feral animals?
The first one was to add the illustration in Chapter 2.
It was on page 7.
Page 7, right.
Page 7.
The next one was to amend the outdoor storage section in Chapter 3. I don't know the page number.
110.
Page 110 to add a component on freight containers, Connex boxes. The third proposal was to amend the temporary use permit section, and the page number on that one.
128.
128, to change outdoor sales to temporary use. And the fourth component was the animal.
Animal control.
Yes.
And
Okay, we do have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. Okay, now moving on to general business. Reappointment of Doug Bowles and selection of an alternative to serve on the Truckee Meadows Regional Planning Commission. I nominate the alternative to be George Cameroto.
And Doug to be reappointed.
Doug to be reappointed. So,
I second that.
okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Passes. Okay, and general business number 12 is a presentation of resolution number 207, commending Commissioner Barbara Sanders for her service to the City of Sparks Planning Commission. Mr. Cameroto, would you like to read that, sir?
I sure would.
Okay.
This is resolution number 207, introduced by the Sparks Planning Commission. It's a resolution recognizing the contributions of Commissioner Barbara Sanders. Whereas Barbara Sanders was appointed as Sparks Planning Commissioner on January 25th, 2010, and has continuously served since this date, and was elected as chair in 2014. And whereas Commissioner Sanders served as an alternate to the Regional Planning Commission since 2010. And whereas Commissioner Sanders has unselfishly committed her time and knowledge to making significant contributions to the planning process for the City of Sparks during her tenure as a member of the Sparks Planning Commission. And whereas the Sparks Planning Commission meets on a regular basis, requiring Commissioner Sanders' attendance at many public hearings, workshops, and study sessions. And whereas Commissioner Sanders was always available as a mentor, sharing her experience and knowledge. And whereas every member of the Sparks Planning Commission, present and past, is proud to have served with Commissioner Sanders. And whereas the Sparks Planning Commission recognizes Commissioner Sanders' contributions to the Planning Commission and to the City of Sparks, now, therefore, be it resolved that the Sparks Planning Commission acknowledges and sincerely appreciates the invaluable contributions that Commissioner Barbara Sanders has made to the City of Sparks during her tenure as Planning Commissioner, passed and adopted this 18th day of June 2015 by the Sparks Planning Commission. Here you go. All right.
Well, Barbara, the time I've served on the commission, you've done a great job volunteering and working with staff on a lot of things, so I commend you on your hard work, that's for sure.
Thank you.
Barbara, it's been a pleasure, and I'm jealous because you're retiring and moving to a house with a pool and an air conditioner. So
Yes.
enjoy Las Vegas.
All one story.
All one story.
Barbara, I like to say I'm one of the old-timers here with Mitch, and I've never seen a resolution written up like that before. That's one of the first times I've ever seen that. And working with you, Dr. Sanders, I don't know how the Truckee Meadows is going to work out there without you, because you told me some of the stories up there that I just don't believe. But it's been a pleasure working with you and knowing you, and God bless.
Thank you. Thank you. It has been an absolute pleasure to work with everyone here. There's not a finer staff that anybody could ever ask for. You could never feel stupid. You could ask any question you want. You could ask it as often as you want, and they'd keep answering, even if they tried it several different ways until it got through to you. That's always been a great thing, and my commissioner colleagues, from the day I started, I've always felt like a member of the team. And I thank you for that. That's a very unusual thing to have happen. I will miss this very much. Thank you.
All right, public comment, if there's anybody from the public that would like 3 minutes to speak. Seeing none, any comments for the commissioners? I'll ask for an adjournment.
So moved.
Okay,
Second.